for being here and checking me out. So the title of my book is A is for Adjunct. So an adjunct is a member who is a faculty member at a community college, a junior college, someone in higher ed who isn't protected by tenure. So you guys know a little bit about how the tenure system works on campus? What do you know? What have you heard?
You have to be here a certain time to be on tenure.
I've been here 12 years.
Never mind.
But yes, generally it does take some time to move up. So if you are on what we call a tenure line, then you're hired in and you're given a few years to publish, show demonstration of superior teaching, and then you're moved up from usually an assistant professor to an associate professor to a full professor, and that can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years usually. And so there's a very clear career path for moving up. So those are what we call tenure lines. The rest of us are on non-tenure lines, which means that even though I've been here 12 years, I'm considered a contingent faculty member. So every year my contract gets renewed, hopefully, right? I am actually, ECU does not call us adjuncts, we're called fixed-term faculty. And fixed term would indicate that maybe I would only be here a short time, but instead there are all of these lines that ECU continues to use for those of us who aren't on tenure lines. So some of the problems around not having tenure, many of us don't have good job security. Our pay is much, much less than those who are on tenure lines. So my salary is less than $34,000 a year, which always shocks my students when I tell them that, because that's less than a public school teacher, much less than a public school teacher who's been teaching the same amount of time that I have. I do have benefits. So because I'm full-time, so some people make the distinction and say adjuncts are not full-time faculty, they're only part-time faculty. So some folks would say, well, you're not technically an adjunct. Others would say, yes, you are, because you don't have job security. So there's some competing definitions there. But the main thing here is that my contract is renewed yearly. Some of my colleagues, it's renewed semester to semester. So they don't know in the fall that they'll be back in the spring. And they don't have benefits. So in some ways, I'm lucky. I've been here a little bit longer. I do have some of these privileges. My pay has been stagnant for 5 years. Have not gotten a raise. And as you know, what has happened to tuition in the past?
It's gone up like, what, 96%.
Mm-hmm. So where's that money going is the question. Certainly not to adjunct and not to tenured professors by and large either. Their salaries have been largely stagnant. They did get a little bit of pay bump this year with some funds that would allow for a pay bump if they moved from associate to assistant or assistant to full professor, so tenure and promotion money. Those of us on fixed term saw none of that. So public school teachers got a nice bump in North Carolina, some more than others, but we on the tenure line here at the university did not receive any. So one of the, I guess the talking points around National Adjunct Day is we often hear in America, well, poverty is a choice, right? People who are making low wages should go to school, because if you get an education, you'll be able to get out of poverty, right? That's not the case with many of my colleagues. So I have a bachelor's degree in English, I have a master's degree in English, and I'm just about done with a PhD in English, which means a lot of school, right? I am considered an expert in the field of digital literacies across the nation, and have quite a bit of teaching experience, research experience. However, because I'm not on a tenure line, then there's not really a chance for career advancement. At one point in time, ECU was able to offer some multi-year contracts, which gave a little bit more security. So when you were hired on, you knew that you may have a 2-year, 3-year, or 5-year contract. With the budget crunch, those have largely disappeared. So that's one of the issues here. Another issue is that this is not just an issue for fixed-term faculty. It's an issue for students. So I teach when a 4-course load, so that's 4 courses each semester, is considered full-time load. That's 100 students. So I teach writing classes, writing intensive courses. It takes roughly, say, 45 minutes to an hour to respond fully to an essay, right? To give it the kind of response I want to give it so that students become better writers. This means that largely I'm working for under minimum wage. Right. Teachers who are instructors not on tenure lines get fewer resources and support from their departments. In terms of professional development, I get a whopping $100 a year to attend conferences, which means that the rest goes in, that takes from that $34,000 salary already. Pay out of pocket because I want to stay current in my field. I want to make sure that I'm doing the best job I absolutely can in teaching students to write in a digital environment. The field of writing studies has really been turned upside down in the past 20 years with digital tools. And I want to stay on the cutting edge. I want to stay on the forefront because I really want students to be prepared, for the job market, for civic engagement, for their upper level writing intensive classes. So it's important to get that professional development, but it's just not supported for those off the tenure line. Most conference registrations, they can range anywhere from $250 to $500. So your $100 doesn't go very far every year to even attend one meeting or a conference. So what kind of questions do you guys have? That's kind of my spiel, is that, really the adjunct issue is hurting our students because every year colleges are relying more and more on adjunct labor, taking away the tenure lines. So your likelihood of being taught by an adjunct grows every year.
So for benefits, what type of benefits do you have? Do you have dental, health, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I do have, because I am on a full year contract. That means I do have state health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance. Now, all of those, there is a small fee associated with those, but still, the insurance benefits are a significant part of the package. But my colleagues who are on semesterly contracts do not get those.
This might be a little personal, so
That's okay.
but where do you live? Is it
Let me
good
close this door. Getting really loud.
Yeah.
So my husband's a public school teacher, which the issues of education have been really hard on our family because both of us are in education. But we live in a house, we own a house, we have 4 children, and we scrape by. And by that I mean that if there were a major, some kind of major event in our family, a sickness, if one of us were unable to work, it would be very difficult to pay the mortgage next month. And so the more cuts we see in education, the more tenuous our positions are, and the more we worry for what that means for students coming through high school in Pitt County, coming through East Carolina University.
So what are the benefits that ECU gets for taking tenure away? Like, are there specific, are they taking it away because they're like, oh, because then we can get this? Or is it just broad, they just want it?
Well, the North Carolina legislature has cut funding to all our public campuses severely. I think last year there was an 8% cut. This year cuts have come on top of that 8% cut. And so we're seeing universities want to pare down any necessary expenses. So a tenured faculty line, is going to cost you X amount of money, probably double what my line costs, right? So I'm cheap labor. And so that's one of the reasons when we see a shrinking of education, we see more exploitation of workers, more reliance on cheap labor like myself. But the funny thing is here, the interesting thing here is that our administrator salaries keep going up. So our provost is making over $300,000 a year. So while we're seeing cuts at the lowest kind of part of the academic chain here, the people who have the most contact with students like me, we're not seeing those largely in upper administration. And so that's disheartening, right? So it seems like things are getting bigger at the top, but yet those of us on the ground, I work with 100 first-year students each semester, so I have contact with largely 200 first-year students every year, and the time and attention that I can give to each one of them seems to be shrinking. And in the English department level, our administrators have tried to do a nice job of keeping class sizes at 25. There's been a lot of push from upper admin to change that, to make those larger as well. And so every time you put another body in that room, more time, more effort, less one-on-one attention, and this is something that's happening, in K-12 education as well as at the college level. Some of my colleagues call this the Walmartization of higher education.
That's actually a really great way to describe it.
Yeah. So it's an issue that I feel pretty passionate about because all of my friends are teachers, almost. I mean, whether they're at the K-12 level or the high school level, K-12 level or college level, this is impacting them. So the movement today that's out on the cupola is actually being spearheaded by some of our tenured faculty members. who are really worried about what this reliance on more and more adjunct labor means for the system in general, what it means for our students.
Do you have any goals for like the future as far as, what do you want to see happen? Do you want to get the faculty at the higher level, like the admin involved, to get them to sort of restructure the system, or what's your overall goal?
Yeah, I'd like to see less exploitation of fixed-term faculty members, contingent adjunct faculty members, a living wage. When you have a master's degree and a PhD, I don't think minimum wage is an acceptable figure to live on.
Especially if you're trying to pay back loans.
Exactly. More and more college debt, and stagnant or even shrinking salaries in some cases. Here at ECU, I'd like to see a ladder system put in place. Some universities actually have career advancement options for fixed-term faculty. So they have different categories that you can, it's not really like a tenure line, but there is more security. You can move up into multi-year contracts. So they have different terms, and I can't remember the exact terms, but they'll have different terms for a first-year lecturer, a second year, second or third year. Once you've shown you've demonstrated that you are a superior teacher, and usually we're evaluated on teaching, service, and research. But even though every year I show excellent scores in each of these categories, there's nothing else to be done, right? There's no way to advance. There's no way to distinguish myself in the career.
So y'all have an annual review?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Done by.
But for those of us who are continuously ranking, as distinguished, then there's nothing else.
There's no reward.
Right. It's a glass ceiling in some ways. Now, me personally, I'm in the PhD program. I will likely, when I finish, I don't want to leave ECU, but there's no career advancement here, so I'll likely go on a national job search to get on a tenure line. And I love the students here. I absolutely love East Carolina and would love to stay, but there's just not much room for advancement. So we are just about out of time. Are there any other questions or comments, or is this an issue you've heard much about as students?
I had no idea about it really.
Yeah.
We're so
We heard it yesterday in class.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
In Dr. Kita's class?
Mhm.
Okay.
I've
So,
heard about it
You
because
had,
my mom's a teacher, and all her teacher friends, so I hear about it.
And so she's at the K-12 level
Yeah.
in North Carolina? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
She used to teach high school, and then she went out with me, and then she had to go to elementary school,
Mhm.
and she's just like a reading specialist now,
Mhm.
and so she's having the same issue with like she doesn't have a classroom, so she doesn't. I don't know, her worth in a school isn't as big
she's
as
like traveling.
yeah.
She like goes to
Right.
the room. Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
And many adjuncts don't have offices. Here at ECU, I do, and all of my colleagues have an office. Some have to share, but at least we have an office. We have technology. The conditions are typically worse at community colleges. And with Obama's new plan to offer free access to community colleges, which I think is a wonderful plan in theory, right? What does that mean for hiring more and more adjuncts? So I'm worried about what that's going to look like in the long run if we don't really address the inequities in higher ed. Anything else? Awesome. Well, thank y'all for checking me out. That was fun.
Yeah.